What is up, everybody? This is the Pick Six podcast. It's a little bit of a smaller edition today. It's Jimmy Watkins. It's me, Evan Bland. Sam is in Lincoln today, talking with some Nebraska administrators about a number of goings-on with the Board of Regents meeting coming up. We'll get into that.
Beer.
We may be joined by Tom Chattel at some point. We never know. He just sort of wanders in at some point, and so we may hear from him as well. It's fall. Jimmy, you have the hat. Yeah, I feel like you're embracing the colder weather.
100 degrees too much, too often. I was ready for summer to end. I've always said summer's the best season. I don't care. Anyone who loves winter and embraces like cold, rainy. I'll feel this way in about 2 weeks. I think you just get tired of what's happening in the moment. Everything else, the grass is always greener type deal. Mm-hmm. But I was ready. I was ready for this. I just needed like to be able to breathe, man. It gets so hot a couple times. Like my air conditioning went out in my car, and it's just like I got to roll my windows down. But it feels like Death Valley outside. Like ready for this.
Some of it's like the wardrobe too. Like you can only wear like a certain portion of your wardrobe in the summer, and now it's like, hey, quarter zips and hoodies and
more versatility,
hats, all this stuff.
More versatility. Now I should mention we are recording with heavy hearts today because my grandfather's cat Mango died yesterday. Mango was either 13 or 14. We're not quite sure. Not my favorite cat. My lasting memory of Mango will be trying to wrangle him up in his carrier to take him to the vet during the pandemic when my aunt and I flew down there to help Grandpa out, and he was hissing at me and trying to scratch at me. But the bright side is the reason I'm bringing this up, really, is that we lied to Grandpa about it. Grandpa doesn't know Mango is dead. Grandpa's like 90-something, and he doesn't know much of what's going on, but he thinks Mango's at the vet. So Another point for lying.
To carry this over, yes, from the previous podcast, that lying is good. That's
can be helpful.
I don't know if you want to call that your life motto, but it's certainly a pillar.
It's an overarching philosophy of mine, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to get into some other philosophies related to Nebraska football here coming up. We're going to talk about Eric Chinander, defensive coordinator, out this last weekend after another porous performance by the defense. We're going to get into, on this bye week, some coaching candidates. Bruce Feldman from The Athletic put out Kansas's Lance Leipold, Iowa State's Matt Campbell, and Alabama offensive coordinator Bill O'Brien as three central, maybe front runners for the Nebraska job. At that point, we'll touch on those three. But let's start with this. And this is, again, the reason that Sam's not here, is talking with some Nebraska administrators about some pretty major topics that are going on with the Board of Regents here in a week. They're going to vote on these topics. The first point, multimedia rights deal. Nebraska has agreed in principle to a 15-year, $300 million deal with Playfly Sports that starts October 1st and will essentially outsource these multimedia rights deals that Nebraska has handled on its own in-house for the last 14 months. So that'll sort of manifest in signage, that manifests in advertising, quality of broadcast, all these different things. Nebraska has that going starting in a week. They also are going to vote on selling alcohol at Pinnacle Bank Arena, men's and women's basketball games for Nebraska. And then the third point that will probably interest most fans and directly impact the most fans, beginning the conversation of renovating Memorial Stadium and what that could look like. Which of those 3 points interests you the most, Jimmy, as we dive into this?
Your point about Memorial Stadium, I disagree with. I think if there's it's apple pie in America. It used to be baseball, now it's football, and it's beer. These are like the three monocultures that still remain. Everyone else, you're watching shows. There's no even Game of Thrones was like a very segmented thing. You could say like if 20 million people watch Game of Thrones every week, that's what, like, I can't do math, but like 1/15, 1/30 of the population. People love beer, people love football, people love apple pie. So that's what everyone is asking. Last year, every like 2 weeks, every month Trev does his radio show, there's always a beer question. When's it coming to PBA? When's it coming to Memorial Stadium? That's what interests me the most. I think it's like particularly on the football side, we're not getting there yet, but it's a vehicle that I think can keep people at games. Even if there's not a ton of reason to stay, you can at least tie one on. Basketball had a little bit of that last year. I think there's going to be a little bit less of the reason to leave the game early, but doesn't hurt to throw a beer in there to sweeten the deal. It's just it makes these events more eventy, where you don't need to necessarily be a basketball fan to go to a basketball game now. Like, you can make it a night out with your buddies, right? We were talking to Z Long, our director of visuals and many other things. There's no job title that can properly encapsulate everything Z does for us before this, but we were talking about Creighton baseball on Sunday afternoons sometimes does like dollar beer day, and it's like Big East baseball, not the biggest attraction, but you throw in beer, people are going to show up. People are going to show up. When you want someone to help you move, what do? You give them beer. And so that's why that interests me the most, because it makes this a more populist type of deal. It makes Pinnacle Bank Arena appeal to more people, which is good.
What do you think of that when you came here and saw that Nebraska didn't sell? Because I don't know, did Kansas State, when you were in Manhattan, did they sell alcohol? Do you know?
Honestly, I was there for 5 months.
Okay, not sure. How did it strike you though, coming here and seeing that you couldn't buy beer at an event?
It was weird. Most every arena I've ever been in, you can buy beer. It's part of the culture of sports, man. Like, you watch a game, you have a beer. And so for it to not be a part of a university where sports is so entrenched in the brand, it was jarring to me. And so as fast as you can, I know Trev has said, and I agree with him, that the football stadium doesn't have the facilities, the Wi-Fi and everything that you need to get, but as fast as you can make that happen, you have to make it happen. You're already behind the times on that one. Yeah,
they don't have the infrastructure. We saw that with the Garth Brooks concert last year when they dabbled, they dipped their toe into selling it, and it didn't go well. I mean, it was very sort of on the fly sort of operation. Obviously, you need something a little better than that. So this is sort of symbolic of, or not symbolic, but it's that first test of what it could be, because, like we said, this is a PBA only possibility. This does not include Haymarket Park, which it easily could. I mean, I've been to many games, Nebraska games, where there's a Salt Dog game that follows, and they pull out some stations.
Can you explain to me why isn't it a Haymarket Park thing? Why not?
Why isn't it included now? I don't know why it's not included now. But the infrastructure portion with the football is, like I said, not at all part of the factor with the Haymarket Park, because they do. They roll it out. They plug in a couple hoses, and it's like they're ready to go. So, that's one that you could obviously look at down the road.
And to this point, why has it just been? It hasn't just been an infrastructure thing, right? Is it kind of like, to me, an idea that's circling in my head is is this part of an old guard, Nebraska holds itself in a higher regard? We're the buttoned up, you know what I'm saying? Is that part of it? Is that why it took us this long to get here?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could make that argument, and certainly the man who built Nebraska football, sure, Tom Osborne, was against alcohol, has been against gambling. I think those are
tough hang.
Those are factors in this thing. But yeah, I think there's a sense among Nebraska's fan base, or there has been at least, that they hold themselves to a certain standard, and that's to this point included not selling alcohol at events.
The standard, the on-field standard, is withering.
Yeah.
So give the people a beer. Yeah. That's what I say.
So the other portion of Memorial Stadium. So if you remember last year, Nebraska put out a survey. Thousands of fans responded. The biggest things that they were looking for at that time, the survey showed, were more comfortable seats, so wider seats, seat backs, and alcohol sales, of course. And so we touched on that topic, but it's going to be a major renovation. Memorial Stadium opened in 1923, so it's about 100 years old. And you can see it, right? You can see in West Stadium how they've built on the outside, and when we walk in the concourse, you can see where the original wall was, and you can see sort of how it's been, built upon and expanded upon, and in a lot of ways, there's still a lot of room to figure some things out there. What do you think? You've been to a lot of modern facilities. What are some things, having seen Memorial Stadium, that would be a good upgrade?
Like little like clubby areas, like at baseball stadiums, they have those little patios where it's kind of like a bar restaurant feel to it. Some maybe an umbrella situation, a few scattered tables. I like that. What I need. This is for any football stadium. You need to have more access to the other action that's happening. Like have televisions in the concourse. And I know that they have like televisions that most stadiums have televisions that are showing that current game. I think that's a mistake. If you're at the game, you know what's going on in the game. The college football, attending college football, live college football events is what I'm trying to say. The biggest challenge to live college football events right now is that being on your couch is awesome on a Saturday. Like particularly if your team's playing a dud, why would you want to go watch? I guess you could argue that Georgia Southern, you got to stay on your toes, but like 9 times out of 10, that's going to be 35-7 or 42-0, something like that. Why would you go watch that in person when you can watch that on your main screen or even a side screen, and you got top 25 matchups going on all around the country? Or you could watch, during games, what are we doing? We're watching Marshall beat Notre Dame and high-fiving 'cause Notre Dame's annoying, and like we're keeping an eye on the rest of the Big Ten. Even when we're working, we're actively like monitoring other games.
Sure.
Fans are doing that to a higher extent because they're not being paid to be there, right? So that's a critical part of the puzzle to me. That I think right now that the situation they have is like, during TV timeouts or quarter breaks, it's like, hey, here's the halftime score of Michigan, and oh look, Iowa State beat Iowa, yay! Like that sort. Like we need more. We need more access to the outside world of college football. Make that stadium feel like a place where you can still be intact. You're not just locked into one very small corner of what's happening in college football. And I think everyone would agree, wider selection of food options at any stadium. Like it's. I understand there are challenges from the stadium perspective. You're in a tough spot there, but like more food options is always good.
Sure. I think the other thing, and we've talked about this before, but when Nebraska expanded the capacity of the stadium, I think that's a move that it would not do if it had that chance to do it again. And so the capacity now is 86,000 or something like that. You wonder, how much those wider seats could reduce that capacity by. We talk about the sellout streak sitting at 385, but as Trev Alberts told Sam today, there's still roughly 1,000 tickets unsold for the Indiana game. And looking at some of the future home games too, it's wide open in terms of whether that thing will happen. So I think to your point about there's just so many other options for fans to do. You don't have to come and put fannies in the seats the way that you did 20 or 30 years ago. You have to up the amenities. You have to increase the Wi-Fi capability. You have to make it more of a show. The third quarter light show that they do has been popular.
That's great.
More stuff like that.
For sure.
To draw in the casual fan. And I would agree, I thought going to the Oklahoma game last year was revealing in what they did. I mean, they had sort of that open area that students could congregate with some tables. I mean, that's great. Like, you don't need to be standing on the bleachers the whole time. Come down, converse.
Drink in the whole stadium,
around, have those concourses, and this is probably not something Nebraska can do, but I love those places where you can have concourses where you can walk around and still see the action.
Sure,
that's more popular for baseball, but I mean, again, this is a 100-year-old stadium that they're going to renovate. Ted Carter, the president, former naval officer, said this is going to be like flying an airplane while you're renovating it. It's not going to be easy to do because they're going to have to continue to be functional as they're sort of reimagining what Memorial Stadium can be.
To your point about the capacity thing, we get a very small taste. Like when Memorial Stadium is packed, everyone's got their shoulders hunched in and elbow, and like, oh, excuse me, every time you move, excuse me, you want to itch yourself, excuse me. Like that stuff, that's annoying. We get a very small taste of that in the elevator before every game, right?
Sure.
Evan and I, part of our job on game days, to go down, talk, sort of rub elbows with the recruiting visitors, me on the basketball side, him on the baseball and football side. Then we come back. We go down there with like 60, 70 minutes till kick. We come back. I come back usually 15, 20 minutes till kick. And you're going up the elevator with a bunch of people, and it's like, real tight quarters.
Yeah.
It's extremely uncomfortable. Like I was like brushed up like basically my chest against this man's back last weekend, and I had a tied to go stick in my pocket, and he goes, "Is that a pencil in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me?" I go, "No, actually, it's a tied to go stick," and I held it in front of his face. I got a good laugh, but it's uncomfortable. That's my point.
Yeah,
that's my point.
It is.
And so imagine that, but for 3.5, sometimes 4 hours. That's where college football is right now. And like in games where there's a lot of energy, everyone's expected to stand. Like, it sounds miserable to me, man. Like, I would, again, much rather stay at home. So anything, like, yes, bring the capacity in, give people more elbow room. Everything needs to be wound back a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I'll just touch real quick on this third point. So Nebraska outsources its media rights to Playfly Sports. They're sort of an up-and-coming company.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before today.
They work with Michigan State. They work with Maryland in the Big Ten, and then a handful of other sort of smaller FBS schools. But Nebraska is probably their biggest brand that they've added to this point. Again, like, it's something that fans may not necessarily feel the direct impact of, maybe in the quality of some of the broadcasts, especially in some other sports, some marketing areas. But this is, it's a major influx in cash for Nebraska. You're talking $300 million over 15 years. And if you look back, they had made a deal in the spring with JMI Sports. It was a San Diego-based company for 12 years and $215 million. They sort of backed out on that when the Big Ten was on the cusp of adding USC and UCLA. So this deal now ends up being about $2 million more per year for Nebraska than what that other deal would have been. So again, that's something that's sort of indicative of the times. The interesting thing about this was sort of a line item in it where they designated and they set aside $2.25 million for an NIL fund over this time. And you break it down over 15 years, that's not a ton of money. But what it does is it indicates that this is sort of the new reality. This is the way that college sports are going, because when Nebraska has an in-house operation, by NCAA rule, they cannot pay student athletes to be on their show because they are the institution. But when they have a third party like Playfly, now all of a sudden this opens up the opportunity for Playfly to pay these athletes as a third party. And it's sort of another notable step as Nebraska figures out its NIL situation and is competitive on that front.
My takeaway when you say that is what happens to all these 93.7 ticket shows. Like, the Sam Hoiberg show. That's an NIL vehicle for him. Like, that feels like a direct competitor to me, no?
I think it's just another thing. I mean, if you want to have your own show, you can do that.
Well,
like,
but if
to me, this is like, hey, you're going to go on the Husker Sport Network. They're going to pay you to do that now.
If you are Nebraska, would you not want to funnel people toward the media venture that you have more control over? Because, for example, you remember last year, our friend Kobe Webster goes on 93.7 The Ticket and says some things about accountability, and Nebraska basketball has to have an impromptu press conference about it, and it's a huge, big mess. We've had this conversation before. That doesn't happen if the conversation is being had on a Husker branded, like an in-house network. That doesn't happen.
Sure.
That doesn't happen. There's less room for meandering, like there's just more control over it. And if you're Nebraska, that's what you want from those types of settings, because I understand the appeal of using the media stuff as a way for the kids to earn money. It's easy, it's painless for them, and maybe for some of them, like I know, I forget who, but I think there's one kid that has is a sports media major. I can't remember who it is right now, but I think there is a kid on the basketball team that's like a sports media major. Sure. And so there's it's an opportunity for them to try to get their feet wet in that arena. And if they're not thinking about it, maybe this is a way that you can think about it, because that's a common career path for a lot of athletes after they're done playing, right? It's a little risky. It's a little risky. You know a lot what's going on, and it's a lot to keep track of. And when you're speaking extemporaneously, sometimes you make mistakes. Sometimes you hit a block and you're just like, I got to say something. Here's what's on my mind. So more control over that
Yeah.
is good.
Well, it'll be interesting. It's it's uncharted territory. Like if you're set up that way, would players have their own podcasts? Would they just sort of make one-time appearances on existing shows? Would they, create video content of some kind? Like I don't know. It's totally open. If it's a one-time thing, that's probably my guess would be that's more what the university would be looking for, as opposed to you want your own weekly show. That seems to be something that you would go outside of the university umbrella for. But it's all wide open, man. Like in this era, and it's not just sports, of this era of individual rights and championing the rights of the individual, like this is how that is going now. If you as a student athlete want to have your own show, there's an opportunity to do that. If you want to be paid to appear on a podcast one time by the university, great. But it's all up there. It's all up there now. All right, let's talk about another coaching change for a second Sunday in a row. Nebraska comes down with a major coaching change. This time, Eric Chinander out after 4+ seasons, 48 games as Nebraska's defensive coordinator. First impressions, I suppose, on that, and where did it go wrong? Because again, coming into the season, I think a lot of people, and myself included, felt like the defense could be the strength of this team instead of the extreme liability that it's been.
Where did it go wrong? Bodies, dudes. I think the defensive line has been pushed around a lot, which has forced Eric Chinander to try to compensate for that weakness in unique ways. Like asking safeties, as Sam's talked about this, asking safeties to both play deep if it's a pass and fill a gap from way back. That's damn near impossible to do for your average to even slightly above average college football player. That is an indictment of the recruiting process, although it's a little complicated by the fact that their defensive line coach, Tony Tuioti, left in the offseason to go to Oregon, took a couple people with him. They did also lose Damian Daniels, who I think you could reasonably guess they thought may have decided to come back. Same thing with DeAndre Thomas, right? Like maybe these are guys that they expected to have and maybe didn't put as much time into the recruiting resources because they thought, everyone just like those guys, they'll just come back. DeAndre Thomas isn't going to the league. He'll just come back. And DeAndre Thomas was like, you know what? I'm good on football. And they're like, well, damn. And we go, and Sam and I were talking about yesterday, like, where did we miss on this team? Because obviously all three of us were relatively optimistic on what the season could bring, mostly from my perspective just because of the schedule. Just like, if you can be a normal team, and I think that's borne out. The Big Ten West is not very good. A normal team led by Casey Thompson and, the transfers at the skill positions, which look pretty good, right?
Yep.
Average defense, pretty good offense, could contend in the Big Ten West. Well, what we neglected, a moment that we definitely gave the right amount of attention to at the time, but I think we kind of just forgot about it because there was some fancy guy from Alabama came in. Devin Drew from Texas Tech, like he's played a lot. When Ty Robinson told us in the spring, we need more guys, it cannot be overstated how much of a red flag that should have been. Like, football players don't do that. Football and toxic masculinity are constantly intertwined. It's never going to stop. Like, you're hurt, doesn't matter, play through it, unless you literally can't walk. Like, you're tired, don't tell us, play through it. Like, that's part of, that's ingrained in your DNA from the time you start playing football. Like, from when you're 9 years old, don't tell us you need help. Don't do it. And he did it publicly. He said, we need more dudes here. That says to me, we're getting housed or we're really tired or whatever. The situation along the defensive line in the spring was extreme. And they brought in a guy from Alabama, Stephon Wynn, who hadn't played a lot, but he's from Alabama, right? So we just assume he's got a nice recruiting pedigree, 4-star guy. And again, he played at Alabama, so we assume that helped plugs the hole. Devin Drew, we assume that helped plugs the hole. Well, it didn't. And, Nash Hutmaker has his purpose. He's a big, strong dude. But against teams where you need a little bit more wiggle from your guys, he's not the answer there. And behind him, there's not a lot of answers in general, right? So that's how we get here, I think. I tweeted about this on Sunday. it's kind of like I felt for Chenander a little bit just because I think he did a really good job last year. Didn't think that was a controversial opinion. Got my Twitter mentions exploded for the next 24 hours. What I meant by that was like, okay, yes, last year were they helped by having a bunch of 6-year seniors and stuff? Of course. But why were those 6-year seniors so important? They'd been in the system for so, like, they knew what Chenander wanted them to do. So, like, he needs to get some credit for that, right? And then all those guys left, and I thought that it would be a self-sustaining culture. Like, you know, the guys who were behind JoJo Domann talked all offseason about, we watched JoJo Domann, this is what we like about what he did. They can't obviously replicate everything that he did, but, like, you can pick pieces and parts and say, you know, learn something from watching the guy. Same goes for the guys in the corner room. Like, I've felt since I've gotten here that Travis Fisher has the strongest culture of any position coach. Like, the way he was talking about, like, he was getting on Quentin Newsom in the offseason for not knowing where all the freshmen were. Like, this is like, there's a system in place, and this is, you know, we're going to lose some guys, but they've learned so much from the people who are leaving. Like, we're not going to lose that much. And that just wasn't true. And again, another moment that we should have been like, Tommy Hill, who really didn't play at Arizona State last year. Like, he did some punt return stuff, but
right.
as far as like playing snaps and coverage, didn't really play at Arizona State last year. Comes in immediately, basically takes the second corner job from presumably Braxton Clark, who's been in the program for 5 years now. Very toolsy, 6'4", long. Like, in theory, has a lot of the things you want in a corner. We were all like, oh my God, Tommy Hill. And they told us, like, Tommy Hill, Travis Fisher said, Tommy Hill has the potential to have his number on the wall or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have thought a little bit longer about that and been like, why is the transfer who hasn't played very much immediately coming in and usurping the guy who's been here for 5 years? It's easy to look at it now, hindsight's 2020, right? But, like, we should have been. There's just a couple of things that stood out to me.
Yeah, I agree. I thought there would be more value in continuity on that side of the ball. The DB coach has been there since the start of the Frost era. The inside linebackers coach, same thing. The outside linebackers coach, was out for a year, but essentially is very familiar with that defense. And the trajectory of it was interesting because it seemed to get better every year until this year, statistically. Last year, it didn't give up a first down in the second half at Michigan State. It held Ohio State and Oklahoma to pretty low point totals by those program standards. And I agree. I mean, I felt like, especially in the secondary, you could put in some guys who have been in the system for a couple of years, and there wouldn't be that big of a drop-off because they understood what was going on. And the responsibilities weren't that, like, it's keep everything. The defense is keep everything in front of you and make tackles. That's pretty simple. Like, it's kind of a. Now the problem is when you can't stop the run, you can't play off like that. You need to commit more guys, and now you're vulnerable to get beat deep. And that's what's happened this year. They can't stop the run at all. But, like, that's why we were all like Chenander sort of pasted together between the front six, I guess, in this defense. And JoJo was a huge part of that. We that's another thing. We underrated the impact of him and the other 6-year guys. But I just figured he could do it again, and he couldn't. No, he couldn't. And, I think you look at the bigger picture of what Chenander did. I'll never forget when I went down to the Peach Bowl after the 2017 season. The staff had already come over. Eric Chenander did not talk like a typical defensive coordinator in the AAC. He was paired with what was then the number one scoring offense in the country, Scott Frost's high-flying attack, and he didn't care that his defense gave up 40-some points a game. He said, if we can get a couple of stops, if we can get a couple of takeaways, give the ball back to the offense, we're so confident in what that side of the ball does that it doesn't really matter if we get burned. We can take some chances because they're going to score. And so over the last 4 years, I felt like there was an adjustment to that. I mean, you look at 2018, 2019, Nebraska's defense took a lot of chances. They got some takeaways, but the offense wasn't scoring on the other side. And they were having quick possessions, and so the defense was seeing
tired
80, 85 snaps a game.
The defense, a lot of people were throwing like yards per game numbers at me. It's like the defense was really good last year for like 2.5 quarters every week, and then they got frickin' tired.
So, yeah, it's a complicated discussion because the offense never did the defense any favors in that regard. But as the years went on, the last 2 years especially, Nebraska didn't get a lot of takeaways. They were among the worst teams at forcing fumbles.
It was bend, don't break. That's what it was.
And by the end, it was sort of bend slowly until you break.
Right.
And then, of course, it all fell apart this year. And, we talk about the Dylan Gabriel run against Oklahoma where, why does that happen? Is that a tackling issue? Is that a development issue? Is that an understanding
They have
of the
one chance to
scheme?
tackle him, and then he was just faster.
Like if you're slow as a defense, I mean, it can be for more than one reason, right? It can be because you don't have the horses. It can be because they don't understand what's going on and they're sort of, paralyzed by analysis. It can be technique. And so I don't know if we ever sort of put our finger on exactly what it was. Maybe it was a little of all of it.
That's kind of that's why you get fired, right? If you can put your finger on one thing and say this is all we need to fix, you can fix it. There's more than one thing happening. Okay, we need bigger changes then.
What can Nebraska fix with 8 games to go? You have a new DC in Bill Bush.
I'll parrot the party line. It's just something different. Like there's with Scott and now like with Chenander for this year, there was just a lot of bad happening. There's a lot of memories with those coaches where we got really close and then we didn't do it right. And like I think for new guys, I think it is a natural inclination for them to be like, we're giving up 500 yards literally every week. This guy's going to fix that. So something different. Like I think a team understands when it's time to make a drastic change. And so like Mickey is signaling like, hey, I know that we need to do something way different. And I don't think I don't know that there's a scheme that's going to make this defense look awesome. I don't know how much Bill Bush can really do. I think this is like change for change's sake. But I understand why you wanted to make a change. So what can you fix? Vibes. Like Bill Bush he's closer to Mickey Joseph. Like Mickey Joseph and Bill Bush are on one side over here. Scott Frost and Eric Chenander are on another side over here.
In terms of personality?
Yes, in terms of personality. There's just more fire to them. And like I think that can be overdone, even manufactured at times, but that's when you're 1-3 and you've been embarrassed on that side of the ball every time you go out to play an FBS school. That's what you need. Like you need someone who's going to lift the spirits and like inject life because the defense looks dead, man.
Yeah,
it's like I'm trying. Like how could it be worse? I don't know. It's about as bad as it could possibly get. This iteration of bad was not even on my radar for the defense. Like, I could understand, like, if you want to say that there could have been a similar issue to last year where, like, teams were hogging the ball from them and, like, 3-4 yard runs at a time and, like, they're on the field forever and they get tired. I could totally see that. This team makes everyone they play look like God. Seriously. Oklahoma could have scored as many times as it wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
And by the way,
they were kind to Nebraska.
Georgia Southern basically did.
Yeah.
Georgia Southern. So when it's that bad, you just got to do something. I don't know that it's actually going to do a ton, but like I said, when you're in that situation, you just need life, energy, a different message, something.
The only thing I can put out there related to how Bill Bush can do it is the qualities that he brought to special teams that you felt like would be an asset. Mm-hmm. I think would translate well to defense too in terms of the details, hammering fundamentals. You're not overhauling the scheme. You're not signing 3 guys in free agency. It is what it is. And I think he's suited to do that. I thought it was interesting that Mickey made a point of mentioning that Bill Bush has worked with Dave Aranda 3 times. At 3 different schools in a 5-year span at different stops. So he knows, he's had firsthand knowledge of that.
That's cool. Again.
So like,
what are we doing though? Like, what does that mean? What How does that help us now?
Well, I think it just means he knows what he's doing and like what the limits are. You're not mashing your
I'm encouraged.
You're not mashing your
Yay.
palm on the keyboard, hoping to
I understand.
get something to fit.
But that is what they're doing.
But I agree. I mean, it's a tough spot because you're not changing your scheme. You're not changing your personnel. You kind of are what you are. And so if it's Nebraska versus Nebraska this week, it still kind of feels like the Huskers are 6-point underdogs just because of how they've been playing. It's tough. What do you do?
That's really good.
What do you do?
Oh, that's really good.
All right, last topic. Coaching search.
Woo!
That's still going. There are games,
Speaking of new life,
there's a coaching search
It's
going on.
almost December, folks.
Like we mentioned, Lance Leopold from Kansas, Matt Campbell from Iowa State, Bill O'Brien, offensive coordinator at Alabama. Anything stand out to you about any of those particular individuals?
Bill O'Brien surprised, as a name, like Matt Campbell is a name we all knew was going to be on the list. Lance Leipold is a name we all knew was going to be on the list. And Bill O'Brien, there's a little bit of Sean McVay offensive coordinator thing happening in college football where it's like Nick Saban's like, oh, you're a coach with a damaged reputation? Come coordinate my offense filled with future NFL first-round picks for a couple years. Oh, now you're going to get another head coaching job. I proposed on, I think it was last week's pod, a little swap, Bill O'Brien for Scott Frost. Yeah. Everybody wins. So that, for him to be on the same plane as, I don't know how Feldman exactly phrased it, but these three names to be top candidates, that's a name that stands out to me a little bit. I have some, Bill O'Brien did a pretty good job given the circumstances at Penn State, right? He was in there right after all the sanctions hit. But when he went to the Texans, the biggest problem for him, I think he's a good football coach. He won games. Granted, he had Deshaun Watson, but he won games. The problem was they gave him a lot of power as a personnel, front office guy. He did a terrible job of managing those resources. You can't trade for first-round picks in college football, so we're good there. But Bill O'Brien did a terrible job of that. And, that's kind of your role as a college football coach, right? You're the GM and you're the head coach. So given that troubling track record, that gives me some pause. But it's different, right? You're drafting in a slot out of a select group in the NFL. In college, you can pick whoever you want. So I would trust that, again, you don't get to where Bill O'Brien's been as a coach without understanding what works for you. So I think that would improve there. I just have some pause just because the Texans stuff was really weird and really bad at times. As far as Leipold and Campbell go, we know what the deal is there. Matt Campbell and Lance Leipold are both appealing because they both brought programs from the dirt. And that's kind of where Nebraska is right now. So it's a direct correlation. Hey, you can do that there. Now do the same exact thing, but with more resources and better facilities and NIL greatness, whatever.
Yeah,
that's what I see.
Yeah, I agree. I think the O'Brien part to me seems a little bit forced. I mean, he's a East Coast guy by nature. You look where he's been: Maryland, Georgia Tech, Duke, New England Patriots for a number of years. That's where he is from. I think he's a Massachusetts native as well. And it feels like, okay, yeah, he's doing well as Alabama's offensive coordinator. I think a lot of people would be given
star,
given the resources they have to work with. So I've been digging a little bit more into...
How did you make Jalen Waddle look so good?
I've been looking a little more into Leopold and Campbell, and you're right.
I don't think Jalen Waddle was on their team then, but whatever. You know what I'm saying?
I think it can't be overstated what Campbell and Leopold have done at some of their other stops. Let me give you a couple numbers here.
Leipold, I know he was at Buffalo before Kansas. I'm a MAC guy, and he turned that was a not so great program for a while, and then it was a contender every year.
So Buffalo went back to what was Division 1A in 1999. They went winless. They were an awful team before Leipold got there. They were 52 and 137 as a Division I program. His overall record there was 37 and 34, which you kind of say, okay, whatever. 24 and 10 in his last 3 years, made the top 25, was in the top 25 rankings, which was huge, unprecedented. The program had never been in the top 25 before. Kansas now this year 3-0. That matches their high win total since the Mangino era, more than a decade ago. What he did at Wisconsin Whitewater, Division III school, You know what his record was there?
Well, they win like 5 or 6 national championships, something like that.
Yeah, 109-6. I mean, he rolled, and they were a pretty good program before he got there. They had made the finals a couple years in a row, but they hadn't won a title. And he turned a pretty good program into a dynasty, and he's turned these crud programs with no tradition into very respectable top 25 type teams. Campbell, interestingly, is also from a Division III background. He played at Mount Union in Ohio, Division III school.
You want to talk about dynasties?
Yeah,
every time they lose, the opposing team throws a parade.
Right, fantastic. But like interesting that he also sort of cut his teeth at what would be considered lower level football, even though they were very good. The way that he remade Toledo, they go 34-15 in his time there. They were a losing program before that. Iowa State hasn't had this level of sustained success in more than a century. What he's done. Top 10 victories, top 25 victories. I think he has 10 top 25 victories in his time in Ames, which, like, Iowa State stunk. That was an awful program.
1-11 bad, yeah.
That was an awful program. So, like, those two to me are really interesting guys as program builders at multiple stops who have strong identities, who have roots in the Midwest. Either one of those guys to me is really fascinating.
Counterpoint. It is different to try to do something like that here. Let's start with Leipold. Has worked here before, so I could envision him running into some of the same challenges that Scott Frost ran into, which is, I'm speaking as a guy who is already in Nebraska, either played or coached or like has a connection to Lance Leipold from his time at Nebraska. I know that guy. Maybe he'll listen to me about what I have to say about the program. Oh, he won't? Well, that sucks. Hey, someone tell me something I don't like about that guy. I'm going to go tell everyone else I know. That was a big problem for Scott. There's a lot of like a lot of people that knew him and wanted influence and maybe didn't have as much influence as they want. They're like, screw this guy. And they, sort of jab him in the back a little bit. I could see some of that. And that's going to happen regardless because the new guy's going to come in, whoever it is, whether it's Leipold or Matt Campbell or Person X, and they're not going to want to deal with that. And these, that's great. Like, we've talked on this podcast about how Trev needs to, shield them from that, right? Whoever the new coach is. Just because the access gets coughed doesn't mean it goes, those people go away. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be even madder, I think. And, they're going to keep, that doesn't happen at Iowa State or Kansas or Buffalo or Wisconsin Whitewater. Certainly not there because you're winning all the frickin' time. It's just a different challenge. And, the media corps thing, there's 35 of us. I wrote about this in the Martinez story. There's 35 of us. There are not 35 of us at Iowa State. It's just, there are other parts of the job that you have to be. You don't have to be good at the media to be a good coach, but it's a part of your routine, and it can screw you up. It can knock you off your game. If someone asks, I've made this comparison before. So I'm making the comparison. Matt Campbell answers a question poorly in a press conference. Nebraska has to release a statement about it, whatever. That sticks with you, man. That can you lose a day, and coaches, you can't waste any time. You lose a day. It's the same thing. You leave your keys at home, or the other day I lost my water jug, big water jugs I've been carrying around. I actually found it in my refrigerator later, but I lost it, and it was just it torpedoed my entire morning. I lost the water jug, and now I can't find my keys, and now I'm late for whatever it is I had to go be at. It's a domino effect. It's just another thing that's in your way, and that doesn't exist at all this program. So I'm curious to how they would handle that spotlight. Whereas with Bill O'Brien, at least in that regard, he's dealt with the Texans, NFL teams get, Nebraska gets covered like an NFL team. Alabama, a lot of eyes on you. Used to that.
No doubt. Do you know what Leipold did at Nebraska when he was here?
I don't.
So he wasn't an on-field coach. He did administrative work. He kept up their video recruiting database and helped with on-campus recruiting. So, we talked a lot over the years about where Scott Frost sort of is coming from and how he views Nebraska. He was the star quarterback. He remembers being booed, so on and so forth. There was a lot, as much as he loved this place, there was some baggage too, and some preconceived notions that he had coming in. I feel like Leipold, he worked behind the scenes under Frank Solich and Bo Pelini for a short time and made the transition to Bill Callahan before he went back to UNO when UNO had a football team. So, I I don't think there's any baggage there, and I don't think anybody feels like he would owe them
Still
anything.
Nebraska guy.
It's just a much
Like, you're a Nebraska.
It's much different.
But okay, still you're a Nebraska guy. I'm a Nebraska guy. We're gonna get along.
He's a Wisconsin guy. He's from Wisconsin.
That's not how it's gonna be billed if they hire him. Not gonna go up there and like,
I think it's a healthy balance of like he's been here sure
but that's
20 years
but I'm
ago.
saying that exists for Campbell too, who doesn't have any ties. Like
Sure.
it's just that those voices aren't going away, even if they are being it's just going to keep happening, and you're going to have to deal with it, and that's a unique challenge to this program.
Yeah, it is. There's no doubt. I mean, like you said, this program is covered more stringently than a lot of NFL teams, just in terms of total bodies.
Adrian said
and
that,
attention.
or Adrian said that somebody who works in media professionally said that.
I know. It's a challenge. It's different. But like the appeal is if you get this thing right,
Sure,
it can get right quickly. With all the resources, all that we just talked about with the NIL, with multimedia rights, with the Big Ten TV
if I'm
contract.
Matt Campbell and Lance Leipold, I would also, like right now, everything's so bad. It's just like, I think what Trev wants to accomplish with this next hire is like, if in 3 or 4 years Nebraska football looks like Minnesota football, huge win. We're all super excited. Then what? Nebraska fans get a taste of being okay again. How long is it before, like if Lance Leipold goes like 3-9, 4-8, 5-7, 7-5, 8-4, 8-4, 8-4, 8-4, 8-4. When does that not become acceptable again?
Yeah, it'll be a while.
Would Nebraska retain a coach who went 8-4 like 6 out of 10 years?
There's a lot of scar tissue right now with the fan base, man.
I know.
It would take a while.
I think people are greedy. They want, they get a taste or they want more. So I'm curious.
Yeah. We'll see.
You can go from program savior to this guy doesn't win the big game very quickly. Very quickly. Picks?
Yes.
Well, actually, do you want to do a quick fantasy football score update?
I guess. I'm not sure I want to hear it, but sure.
Actually, you did
go
okay
ahead.
last. Well, the Dylan Gabriel thing was big for you.
Sure.
Because that's your
You guys have your opposing
quarterback.
people coming.
Well, Sam doesn't though, because he has Cade McNamara, who will, in theory, not be the quarterback for Michigan by then. Okay, Sam leads one with 149.6 points. He had 17.8 last week. Not a great week for him. Anthony Grant was pretty much bottled up. Isaiah Garcia Castaneda and Oliver Martin not doing much. Luke Reimer is his most consistent player. Team Jimmy scored 28 points last week and has 90 overall. We're in third place by a considerable margin. I'm just reading them in the order that I put them in my phone. Trey Palmer is by far my best player. O'Shawn Mathis gives me 7 to 10 points every week. I get virtually nothing from the running back position. Brody Belt is my best running back. Haha. And Evan, who got 28.5 points from Dylan Gabriel last week, got 44.4 overall. You're at 135.7, so you're right on Sam's tail. It's Sam in first place, 149.6. Evan in second place, 135.7. Jimmy in third place with 90. I need Braylon Allen to run for 400 yards against Nebraska, which could happen.
Not going to make a lot of friends with statements like that. All right. Let's do the picks here. Going into this week, Sam leads. He's 24-17.
Okay.
Jim Dog, you and I are both tied at, it's hard to read his writing here, 22-14.
It's not bad. We're all doing okay.
So, we're hanging in.
But those are not the same amount of games. 24.
No, it's not. I think Sam, I don't know.
So then he would be 24-10.
I think he's 2 games ahead of us. It's hard to read his writing.
Okay.
Here. Regardless, we have
Riveting
a
stuff.
little
Riveting
ground to
stuff
make up. Yeah, this
for the
is
listeners.
fantastic. All right, Kansas State, Oklahoma.
There are. Did you see the 247 headline? Is Adrian Martinez broken? Tough. Kleiman saying they need to get him to not be afraid to make mistakes. I'm taking the Cats.
Are you?
Oklahoma's untested. I think Kansas State is better than they showed last week against Tulane. Deuce Vaughn is electric. I think Adrian figures something out.
Okay. I think the Sooners build on their Nebraska momentum and continue that one through. Sam picks.
They haven't played of course he picked Oklahoma. They haven't
picked
played a real
Oklahoma.
team yet.
That's true. This is a good one. Wisconsin, Ohio State.
Is it a good one? Ohio State.
Okay. I think Ohio State as well. I think it'll be a decent game. Sam picks Ohio State as well.
I hope it's a decent game.
Minnesota, Michigan State.
I have no idea. Where's the game?
East Lansing.
Michigan State.
Okay. Sam picks Minnesota. I picked Minnesota to win the West. I think they're the best team in the West.
No Chris
even though they
Bell.
haven't really been tested. I know.
Feel for that guy.
I'm picking Minnesota as well.
Okay.
Let's see here.
Respect. I'm on an island. Lone wolf.
Indiana, Cincinnati.
Cincinnati.
Same. Yeah, I'm not a believer in Indiana.
Cincinnati's like almost a 3-touchdown favorite in that game.
Yeah, they're pretty good. Sam also goes Cincinnati. Arkansas, Texas A&M.
Now this is a fun game. I just don't trust Texas A&M to score. I'm going Arkansas.
Wow. Okay. It's in.
I know.
At Kyle
I know
Field.
where it is.
Okay.
I know where it is.
All right. Sam says Texas A&M. I say, I think it's more of a toss-up than the line would indicate.
Mm-hmm.
I can't give Sam A&M on its own. I got to go A&M as well.
I respect that.
It's more of a strategy pick than anything else. Florida, Tennessee.
Oh man, this is something that a pick that probably would have been different 2 weeks ago, huh? Is this in the swamp or is it Neyland?
Neyland, yep.
Damn. I'm going Florida. Damn it, I don't like that pick.
I'm going Tennessee.
Ugh. So Sam, right?
Sam is going Tennessee.
I'm gonna lose so much this week.
Or you're going to gain a bunch of ground.
Yeah, that's not usually how it works for me.
Utah at Arizona State with a new interim coach.
Utah.
Yeah, Utah.
By
Sam
many
says
points.
Utah.
By many points.
Utah's only 5.5
Thoughts
favorite.
on? I mean, I don't know if we can gather this from the clip that they showed, but like, if Herm Edwards got fired on the field, did you see that? Like,
I did. Yeah.
What do you think about that? I think
If he did, he's got a great poker face.
That's brutal.
If he did, he's got a great poker face. It's like, oh, okay.
Handled it with class.
Yeah. Oh, I got you. USC, Oregon State.
It's in Corvallis, yeah.
It is.
Taking the Beavs.
The Beavs? Mm-hmm. I'm going USC.
USC's defense does not exist.
It does not exist. Sam is also going USC. Clemson,
Losers.
Wake Forest.
Clemson by many points.
Can they score?
Clemson by many points.
Okay. Yeah.
I think this might be the week we see a new QB.
I'm going Clemson as well. Sam is going Wake.
Oh, boy.
Sam says Wake.
All right, all aboard the Sam Hartman train, I guess.
Notre Dame at North Carolina.
I trust Notre Dame to beat very few teams right now, but North Carolina did give up 61 points to Appalachian State, so I'm going to go Notre Dame.
Yeah, sadly, I'm going Notre Dame as well.
Man,
Sam,
we were how excited were we about that Cal
that was fun.
almost touchdown at the end of the
did.
game last week? Ugh.
Sam says North Carolina.
I mean, I can see it.
He's zigging when folks are zagging here.
I could see it.
If he were here,
I
I'd
feel
tell
good
him
about him
he's-
being on an island there, though.
If he were here, I'd tell him he's getting off of his script a little bit.
He is.
He kind of gets bored. It's like Wisconsin when they decide to run the football. and you know, so Mississippi, Auburn.
Auburn's quarterback retweeted.
I'm sorry, Missouri. Auburn,
Oh, okay.
Excuse me.
Oh, Mississippi.
Missouri, Auburn. Sorry.
Oh, Missouri, Auburn. Oh, wow. Okay.
Recalibrate that.
Auburn's quarterback did retweet a stat about how his game against Penn State last week was like one of the highest pressure rate games like ever. So that's not great for morale, but I don't think Missouri's very good, so I'm going to take Auburn.
Yeah, Auburn's not very good either, or maybe Penn State's just that
I
good.
think Penn State is pretty good. Defense is pretty good.
Maybe so. Yeah, I'm going to say Auburn. Sam's saying Missouri.
Fighting Toms.
Yeah, that's right. And last one, since Nebraska's not playing this week, Baylor, Iowa State.
We're not picking Nebraska +6 against Nebraska.
No.
What was the game that you said? Iowa against
Baylor, Iowa State.
Oh, Baylor, Iowa State. Give me Baylor.
You think Dave Aranda's doing it? It's at Iowa State. I'm going Cyclones.
Damn.
I think they can get that. Sam says Iowa State. I hadn't looked at this result here too.
This is
a make or break
be an
week
interesting
here.
week for me. Interesting week for me.
And two potential
Sure.
Nebraska candidates there too. Dave
Big bye
Aranda
week
and-
plans, Evan? What are we doing?
I'm going to the Nebraska baseball exhibition at UNO on Saturday. So
Okay.
I wouldn't say huge.
Okay.
That'll be interesting, incidentally.
Yeah.
It's like one of the handful of chances to see them play. There's no red-white series this fall because
Okay.
the field at Haymarket Park's being resodded.
Okay.
How about you?
I've got a wedding next weekend, so I need to figure out if my suit still fits.
Okay.
And if it doesn't, I need to tend to that.
You can't be that much bigger than you were in college.
You never know, man.
Okay, maybe so.
You never know. The last time I wore it was like 2 or 3 years ago. We'll see.
You live
probably.
You live around some tasty establishments in downtown Lincoln. So
There's more.
I would
We're more
understand.
worried about how much bulk I'm putting on. That's what we're concerned about.
Yeah, pumping the iron.
Been at the Y. We'll see.
All right. We'll call it at that. Sam will rejoin us next week. Maybe Tom Chattel will too. We'll see as Nebraska comes back.
An eminent maybe, man.
Gets ready for Indiana. We still have 8 games left in the year. Coaching search. Lots going on. We'll chat at you next week. Thanks for listening.